this topic about getting the best 11 defenders on the field. Clearly, the Niners are trying to work Jimmie Ward back in somehow strategically, getting him out there at nickel. What is your observation of Jimmie Ward, his willingness to play in the nickel position, and how he's looked so far, acknowledging Tommy Huxley doesn't believe he's looked great to this point?
I think that the 49ers' best 11 would probably be to take Jimmie Ward off of the field if he's going to be a nickel guy, and have Deommodore Lenoir slide inside and be the nickel, and have Thomas play outside corner in those situations. That's really tough because I don't like having Ambry Thomas out there. That's where Jason Verrett helps you with that. But I feel like Deommodore Lenoir is a better slot corner than Jimmie Ward. And so I think that's the weak point right now in the 49ers defense, is in that slot. I like Jimmie Ward as a safety. I like him as a guy that can come down in like dime situations and cover the, where he's in the slot playing against a tight end. Jimmie Ward against a wide receiver, I don't like that matchup.
What is the insistence on attempting to play Jimmy at nickel when it appears it's not a successful test?
I think it goes back to what your topic is right here, the best 11. He is one of your best 11, but he's not one of your best 11 at that spot, if that makes sense. And the guys that are running it, and the guys that are behind, in the safety position, Tayshaun Gibson and Talanoa Hufanga, they're playing better than Jimmie Ward and Jaquiski Tartt last year. They're playing better safety than the 49ers had last year.
When you look at this question here by 49er Gang 916, why don't they put Jimmie Ward back at free safety? Do they legitimately believe that Tayshaun Gibson is playing better at that position than Jimmie Ward would be? Or is it the pairing with Talanoa Hufanga? What's your take on why they wouldn't just slide him back into the original position where he does seem to excel?
I think it's because of the play that they're getting out there. I think that Gibson and Hufanga are playing at a very high level. So there's no reason. I mean, Jimmie Ward's a good safety. Don't get me wrong. Yes. Jimmie Ward's not a playmaker at safety, though. Right now, they have two guys that are playing safety that are playmakers that aren't letting guys get behind them.
That's interesting, Jack.
That's the difference.
Wow, you can't fault that. Do you think, as obviously he's not a playmaker to begin with. I will concede that point. Obviously, throw a cast on the man's hand, and it's going to be less so. As he recovers from that injury, would you expect him to at some point be put back in at the free safety spot? Or do you think it's possible that we go the rest, barring injury, with Tayshaun Gibson back there?
I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out, because I could see a scenario where they just keep rolling with what they did in the first half. It worked out well. 6 of the 8 games that they played, they held opposing offenses to 200 yards passing or less. That's, if you take out the game against Kansas City blows their numbers up, but in the other 7 games, they have given up an average of 5.3 yards per pass attempt, which is, we're talking about top 3 in the league. I know we're not, it's different when you're playing against Patrick Mahomes and maybe even this week against Justin Herbert, but still, that's top level defense in the NFL.
It is top-level defense in the NFL. I'm liking the back and forth in the chat. I always enjoy respectful back and forth dialogue. Wanda Brown coming in. No way Gibson is better than Ward. You guys are nuts. Ian Sharp coming back in to say Gibson and Hufanga play well together. I do think that's the contrast, is to say, all right, Ward isn't a playmaker, right? He's not going to be forcing significant turnovers, not going to be getting those interceptions. And Gibson has had some success so far and playing well with Hufanga. And then Wanda Brown coming back in to say, yeah, but Gibson is not better than Jimmie Ward. I think both of those things can be true at the same time. That I would argue Jimmie Ward is a better player than Tayshaun Gibson. And right now with that pairing, they have been able to force more turnovers. My only problem is I want to see Jimmie Ward back there, and we haven't gotten that because of the injury. And I don't think we'll get that chance for a couple more weeks.
Yeah, probably not. I don't know. This is an interesting one because I'm all over the board on Jimmie Ward. I like him as a player. I think he's a good safety. He does a good job of keeping everything in front of him. But he just doesn't take the ball away. He doesn't make, when he has opportunities, he doesn't catch it. He had, for the most part. He had 3
Yeah.
interceptions last year. All 3 of them came against the Rams, 2 of them
Right.
in one game, and then 1 in the NFC Championship game. But other than that, he just doesn't get turnovers, and that's a big piece of what the 49ers need on their defensive side. And the 2 guys that they have back there right now have done a better job of it. And they're not missing anything in terms of pass coverage and tackling, for the most part back there from those guys. So I'm not sure. Jimmie Ward, I think his biggest value for this team was his ability to be a guy that could be a single high safety and then come down into the box and as a safety cover your tight end and running back out of the, in man coverage and be able to mix and match and those kind of things. But, right now, I don't know. I know he was a top level guy last year. It's an interesting one. I think Ward's are really there, but I don't know if he's as good as everybody wants to make.
It is. I mean, he's the most tenured player on the defense. It's easy for the fan base to want to get behind him. It will be fascinating to see how this plays out the rest of the season. I think that's going to give us the greatest insight as to how the 49ers feel about Jimmie Ward. And you do have to take into account that it is another contract year for Jimmy. So that can factor into it depending on where the Niners are. But if they're on the precipice of making or falling out of the playoffs, they will be doing everything within their power to win every single game. And at that point, you'll be able to interpret their moves with Jimmie Ward without taking into account the contract situation. If they fall out of the playoff race, then it changes the conversation because they're looking towards next year. I will say, before we move on from the best 11